everyone, it's Channin here for Honeybee Stamps. In today's video, we're going to create this rainbow Happy Mail card. I'm going to combine two techniques, emboss resist and ink trapping, to create this subtle background that will allow our sentiment to remain the focal point of our card. Let's start out by taking a quick look at our stamps that we're using today. We're going to be using just this set and its matching dies. This is the Hugs Enclosed set. I'm going to start with an A2 panel of white cardstock, and I'm going to quickly and lightly ink blend this panel with 3 distress inks. I'm first using mustard seed, and then I'll move on to a blue, and I'm definitely going to overlap this blue a little bit with that mustard seed to create a green. This is how we're going to get our rainbow simply with 3 colors, just by overlapping a little bit. And this blue is actually Speckled Egg. Once I finish with the blue, I'll move on to my final color, which is Kitsch Flamingo. And again, I'm going to overlap it with some of the other colors. I'm going to overlap it with the mustard seed and the speckled egg to create some new colors, kind of an orange and even a little bit of a purple. So now that I've finished ink blending this lightly, and that's the key, lightly, has to be light, we're going to now stamp on it with that large envelope background stamp. And I do want to note that I did thoroughly dry this panel off camera. I used my heat tool to really make sure that ink was dry, because we are going to do some heat embossing, and I don't want that embossing powder to stick to that whole panel. I want it to just stick to where I stamped the background. So I did apply some anti-static powder as well. I added some tape to the back of my panel so it would stick inside my MISTI and not shift on me while I stamp on it, because I can't use the magnets because my panel's a little bit too small. I inked up my stamp in VersaMark ink and then stamped my panel once. I'm going to ink it up a second time and stamp it again just to make sure I have enough of that ink on there so the embossing powder really sticks. And then I will carefully remove my panel from my MISTI. And then I'm going to go ahead and dip it into some clear embossing powder. What's going to happen here is after we heat set this clear embossing powder is going to trap the ink that's underneath, so this lighter layer of ink, but also act as a resist to the next layer of ink that we apply on top. So everywhere that background stamp was stamped is going to be just a little bit lighter, a little bit paler in color to the rest of the panel when we ink blend the next layer. So after I've got that clear powder all on top, I'm just heat setting with my heat tool, and now I'm ready to do that ink blending or that next layer of ink. So I've got my setup back here, my 3 colors again, and now I'm just going to be really heavy-handed and really get that ink on there. That first layer that we did that was light, you don't have to worry about it being perfectly smooth, a perfectly flat ink blended layer, because a lot of your mistakes are going to be hidden by just the fact that it's just going to be a linear image that kind of holds onto that light layer. You're not going to notice those little flaws. And this layer, because they're so heavy-handed, it's really easy to get a pretty nice ink blend, a nice smooth ink blend. So I'm just going back over with all my 3 colors in the exact same areas that I ink blended them before, also overlapping. And after I kind of get that color all down, I'll then take a dry towel and just kind of go over to pick up any of that residual ink that's on those embossed areas. And as you can see, it's this really cool effect, but it's nice and subtle and perfect for keeping everything that's in the front of your card kind of the focal point. So I went ahead and trimmed this panel down. It is now 3 3/8 by 4 5/8, and this is just going to make a nice white border around it when we mount it onto our card base. I'm now moving on to my sentiment. I have 2 sentiments and an envelope stamp here from the Hugs Enclosed stamp set, and I'm going to ink those up in VersaMark ink and stamp them onto some gray cardstock. Now that I have those stamped, I'm then going to dip them into some white embossing powder, then of course heat set them with my heat tool. These are going to be really pretty, I think, with that colorful background. So I went ahead and die cut those out with the Hugs Enclosed matching dies, and now we're basically ready to kind of put this card together. Now before I mount this blended panel onto our card front, I did trim down some scrap cardstock, and I'm just going to kind of stack those together, so adhere them together, and this is going to provide a little bit of dimension for our rainbow panel. So I'm going to adhere those 2 stacked panels, the 2 scrap stacked panels, to the back side of my rainbow panel, and then I will adhere it on to my card front. And again, all that does is just provide a little bit of lift. You could definitely use foam tape if you rather, but sometimes I find foam tape just too dimensional, too much. So now I'm going to move on to kind of using the same stacked strip strip method, but this time for that large Happy Mail sentiment. This time I'm adhering 3 layers of cardstock together and then adhering that to the back side of my sentiment. Again, just to add a little bit of lift. I could have also die cut the sentiment out 3 more times and used the kind of blank unstamped die cut sentiments, stack those together to add lift instead. So now that I've got that stuck down, I'm going to move on to our little envelope. Now I want to color that little heart inside, so I'm going to use a Prismacolor pencil and just color that little heart a pink, and then I will adhere that to the card front. Now this time I'm stacking 6 layers of cardstock together, a lot because I want it to kind of go over the sentiment, the Happy Mail sentiment, so it needs to be a little bit higher. So I've adhered all those together, stuck it onto my card, and now I'm just going to actually add the envelope. Now the last thing we have is our sub-sentiment. This time I'm going to also adhere 3 pieces of cardstock together and then adhere my sentiment right on top. And then lastly, all I have to do is add some glue to the back side and adhere it to my card front, and that will actually complete my card. Now let's take a look at the finished card. I love how that background turned out. You can still see the envelopes and the mail, but it's nice and subtle so it doesn't take away from the sentiment. And I love that little addition of the pink heart on that gray cardstock. I think that's just a fun little pop of color. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I used, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.